Good afternoon and welcome to Liquid Lunch with the Regional Water Authority here on 103.5 WNHH on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Kevin Watsey. I'm the host of Liquid Lunch with the Regional Water Authority, and I'm the Director of Public Affairs over at the Regional Water Authority. More importantly, I am a water nerd, and today we are going to talk a little bit about water and a lot about academia. We're actually going to continue with a recent theme that we've had the past few shows where we talked a little bit about the Regional Water Authority's education program. And then on our last show, we talked about careers in water. And today I am thrilled to welcome the Dean of the Southern Connecticut State University's Business School, Dean Jess Baronico. And he is going to talk to us, amongst other things, about a very unique program that the business school offers to really teach future leaders in the utility industry. He's also going to talk to us about the Southern in general and the business school. And we're going to have what I hope is a very interesting discussion about things like artificial intelligence in college, and which always makes me wonder why it wasn't available when I was in college. But before we get into all that, we are going to welcome the Dean to our show, and we're going to give him an opportunity to tell us his story, because we love to hear about the origin story of our guests. So Dean, welcome to the show, and tell us your story.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks so much for pronouncing my name correctly. I mean,
Yeah.
A gold star right off the bat.
Thank you.
Well, I grew up in a modest family, grew up as a guitar player, and I also liked puzzles. So, my ambition was really to become the next Eric Clapton of the following decade. But, eventually I had to make some hard decisions. And, as I was growing up and playing in the band, I started to realize that being in a band is almost like running a business. Suddenly I realized you have to know a little bit about financials, especially when the band comes out with only $20 per head after they play a gig where you make a lot of money. And, you need to understand management, marketing, and personal relationships. And hence I decided I might turn my attention to something more business oriented, especially if I wanted to have a future with a family. And hence I enrolled in a business program, the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. Got a fine education, got my doctorate degree there. And I always loved mathematics as well and puzzles. So, the merger of mathematics and business and the creative side of music led me into building mathematical models, became an operations researcher, became a professor, moved on from there, was invited to become a dean because one thing I think the audience might want to know about our leadership style at the business school is we're servant leaders. We care about people. We love our students. We love the community. It's all about servicing others. It's not about servicing ourselves. I have no personal agenda in my career. It's just I want to help people be successful. And hence I became a dean. I've been a dean now for over 25 years. And my journey eventually led to Southern, where I'm the dean now. And, we continue our pursuit of what you might call preeminence, distinction, and being an inspiration for others to follow. And hence that's how I landed here. That's what our goals and ambitions are here. And I'm happy to be there, and I'm happy to be here, and thanks so much again for having me on the air.
We're happy to have you. And I read some of your bio. You've actually spent time all over the world, right?
I was very fortunate in that one of my prior jobs at NYIT, New York Institute of Technology, what really led me to accept that position was they had campuses where the School of Business was a resident across 6 different countries in the world. And what a great immersive experience it was for me to visit so many different places, learn about so many different cultures, and immerse myself in so many different best practices in terms of how people behave, communities function, and schools behave. It was a great opportunity for me to realize how beautiful diversity is among the world and its population.
That's awesome. As somebody who has not traveled much outside the United States, I'm pretty jealous of that. I would love to have more exposure to the rest of the world. And you mentioned music and business. So it's interesting. I've mentioned on the show a few times that I used to work concerts, and I'll just tell one quick story because it relates. I was working a Who concert, and I was surprised. I was young at the time, but I was surprised that each member of the band traveled on their own bus. And I had mentioned it to the tour manager, and he put his arm around me, and he asked me how old I was. And I told him, he says, "Yeah, you're young." He says, "Let me ask you, do you come to work every day with everybody you work with?" And I laughed. I said, "No." He says, "Kid, this is just a job for these guys. They don't come to work together. They show up, they do their job, and they leave." And that was like, it's so simple, but it was such a harsh reality to a young 19, 20-year-old who just thought, oh, they're in the band, they travel together. No, it was just a job for them. But it really is a business, right? The money side of it, the marketing side of it. It's, that's why it's called the music industry, right?
And there's also the personal side, because when you're with your family, even if you go on vacation, it's really an intense experience being with your whole family every minute of the vacation. There's a certain amount of time you need that individual relaxation. And I think it's the same when you're in a rock and roll band.
Yeah, there's a good reason why very few bands from the 70s are still together as one complete unit.
That's true.
Yeah. We talked before the mics went on. We talked about Deep Purple. Deep Purple's probably had 70 different members play with them throughout the decades.
Oh, I've always been a big fan of Richie Blackmore, though.
Yes. Yeah.
So, Richie, we're giving you a plug here on the air in case you and Candace are listening.
There you go. All right. We will talk a little bit more about music later in the 5 unrelated questions, but I do want to give you an opportunity to kick off the discussion before we get into this unique utilities program that I had mentioned. Can you give us an overview of the School of Business at Southern?
Sure, absolutely. We have a lot of things that are typical of other institutions. We have different departments, including accounting, economics, finance, management, marketing, and some others. But we also try to do things a bit more uniquely in that we've established some unique programs, one of which, of course, is our undergraduate degree that focuses on utility management. In addition to some others, we have a doctoral level program that just launched in resiliency, which, of course, is of interest to energy and utilities as well. And we have some academies and things built to really help students find themselves and move themselves forward in the world. Some academies and platforms include focus on women in leadership, the holistic development of our students, because as I mentioned, we don't see universities simply as a place to acquire knowledge capital. It's a place to build collaboration, help students discover where they're going and where they fit in, and what type of contribution they can make not only to themselves and their family and community, but to the world at large. So that's in general what we focus on and some of the degrees we offered. And we find ourselves to be unique in some ways, but we also follow the typical prototype, you might say, of other universities in terms of having standard programs as well.
Has COVID changed? Is the university and the School of Business kind of back to kids in the classroom? I shouldn't say they're kids, college students back in the classroom full time, or has the school adopted kind of the hybrid model that I'm sure COVID kind of accelerated a little bit?
I don't think we'll ever get back to where we were beforehand. I say that both in the positive sense and the negative sense. COVID was a devastating crisis worldwide, universally. But we learned some things from COVID. We learned that we don't necessarily have to be in our seats 24 hours a day to do our job. There is a role for being at the university, having face-to-face collaboration, but certainly there's another place in the world where we have online education and that we can work from home. And the interesting thing about COVID is many students, although they really enjoyed working from home, learning from home, they felt isolated. And I think it brought back to bear the fact that people do need one another in some type of close touch relationship face to face. But I don't think we'll ever get back to where we were before, because we've learned that we can adapt. And this adaptation involves more streamlined education, more efficient modes of delivery, online, hybrid, whatever, and that we don't have to necessarily be planted in our seats to do our job.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. So, at the RWA, we have a hybrid schedule, but I go in 5 days a week. I like being in the office. I love that interaction between people. And quite frankly, you get more done when you can just walk down the hall to somebody's office, get an answer, and move on, rather than trying to hunt them down through a virtual call and an email and a text and all that. It's just, and you build trust amongst colleagues when you're talking face to face with them.
And trust is important. And I know that you're going to touch on AI later.
Yes.
And the idea that there's a certain aspect of trust that's important between people that you don't necessarily find between people and technology.
Yeah, I agree with that. But let's dive into this utilities program, because, we are Liquid Lunch and we are a utility, and it's really a unique program that from what I understand is challenging and educating the future utility leaders in the region. So can you kind of give us an overview of what's involved with it? And I guess more importantly, why was it so important to Southern to start this type of program?
I think the importance to us in starting this program is what I mentioned earlier, and that's care of community. And obviously utilities, energy, public goods are quite important and essential in terms of servicing the public good. And people need water. They need energy as well. I always think of the story that when you see prehistoric men sitting around and paintings, you see them kneeling by the lakes and the ponds because water is essential. But let's not forget that they also sit around the fire at night.
That's right.
Because warmth and energy is important as well. And so, I've also been to a lot of underprivileged nations and cultures that live off the land. And you start to recognize how important water distribution is, energy provision, managing heat during the winter. And it's really about our care for the public good that drove us into pursuing this type of program with Larry Bingaman, who was a great supporter of the program and Regional Water Authority, who provided invaluable assistance in telling us the trends, the important issues that have to be dealt with, the emerging issues they're going to deal with, and the types of skills that graduates of the program really need to have in order to make a successful mark on the community that they serve through utility and energy leadership.
And is this, to your knowledge, do other universities nationally have a program like this? Is this unique to Southern?
It's unique among the schools that we're peers with, and certainly in the local area. It's not the only program of its type nationally or throughout the world, but it is distinctive in that we do cater specifically to educating students to be leaders in the utility sector, and that's something that forms a niche competency for our particular university.
And when we talk about utility, we talk about water because we're Liquid Lunch, but it really is utility-wide, electric, gas, telecom too, or?
Yeah, anything hydro, in terms of water in that sense, nuclear, wind. The idea is that energy is a universal challenge in terms of its provision and also sustainability. And in terms of the environment, there are a lot of things we have to contend with that we have to make sure that we're attending to the needs of the environment, and we're doing things to ensure that we provide clean water, clean energy. So there are so many unique competencies in these types of programs that I think form skilled workers that are a bit different than workers in other industries.
And that's a good point. So what types of classes specifically, if I'm in this utilities program, what classes am I going to take that I might not take in other parts, if I'm, just a business major or a finance major?
Well, you'll want to take classes in our program that were designed to talk about risk management and risk mitigation, obviously something of concern to the utilities. Obviously, students have to have great knowledge of the local, state, and federal regulations and regulatory policy. These are things that are a bit different. You have to understand energy grids and distribution of energy, transmission of energy, data analytics, important of trying to optimize the flow of water, where their needs are in terms of undersupply, pressure, and things like that. So there are different types of skills that don't necessarily apply to somebody who's in the finance industry or working in the banking industry. And we're more than happy to adhere to the protocols and standards that, for example, the RWA and some of the other energy and utility companies have provided us with an understanding that these are the niche types of things our students have to understand if they're really going to make a mark in this particular industry, which is a bit different than some of the others.
Yeah, it's so true because I've spent almost 20 years in water utilities, but I have a lot of friends that work for the other utilities, and we all kind of joke that there's utility math and then there's everything else math. And especially if you're a regulated utility where your rates are regulated by, the state, because then, rates math is its own kind of math, separate from utility math, separate from regular math, to the point that there's a group that has twice a year rate school, where you can actually go to rate school and you spend an entire week learning, how utilities set their rates, but also learning how the regulators in those states handle those rate increase requests.
I can comment on that one briefly because it's a broader discussion, of course, because as an operations researcher and some of my consulting experiences for the public sector, postal services and things like that. And, it's an interesting discussion in the public sector about welfare maximization. The idea is that, you're not a profit maximizer, and you have to really balance carefully the price you set, the reliability of service that you offer, and the capacity of service that you can provide. And it's really a broad discussion that actually becomes quite mathematically complex. And hence the training for students who want to assume leadership positions in this space. Oftentimes they need some pretty strong analytical background in order to understand just how those factors influence one another in terms of optimizing, bringing down the cost for the consumer, providing the right reliability of service. A wonderful discussion for another day on the radio.
Yeah, no, we could, and you said the key word, right? Balance. So there's a balance between, what consumers can afford, what the utility needs to operate, and the future needs, the capital needs. So regulators, they have a tough job. They have to balance all of those.
For sure.
It's like I said, this is my third water company now. I've worked in New Jersey, New York, and now Connecticut, and it's a constant across all the states, is that balance. So yeah, I love talking about utilities. I could talk about it forever. So do the students in the program, is there some real life, real world experience they get to, with some of the utilities that are a part of it, or is it mostly a classroom experience?
We're a very big supporter of experiential education and project-based learning. There's a mandatory part of the program where students have to actually engage in a real project with a team of their colleagues, their other students, with a faculty member overseeing it, where they have to address a real concern or an emerging concern of the utility company, like RWA, where we'll source the project from RWA. Our students will then spend the semester researching the project, gathering the data, doing the analysis, and providing RWA with real recommendations in terms of adding value to what RWA offers. So we're really concerned with experiential education because having intellectual capital is great, but I've always thought of it as those are the tools you have in the little handbag you carry. You have to know how to translate intellectual capital into real practice. So all of our programs, including our program in utilities, focus on the applied experience, getting students out doing real work, collaborating, networking, learning how to be professional about it as well. So these are things we care about, and they're a part of the program. Mandated experience.
Now, I love that. And because, folks like me who've been around a while, we can come up with issues that you may never be able to think of in a classroom, but it happened to me 10 years ago. And how would you handle it if it happened to you? It's, it's something
Absolutely.
else. So obviously the RWA is one of the prime supporters of this, but let's give some of the other supporters a shout out. What other utilities are partnering in this endeavor?
Gas and electric.
Yeah.
And we've been fortunate enough to have Eversource and some others come to the table and give us their perspective as well. And we've also involved other academic institutions abroad. We've partnered with a school in Germany that's very interested in the program, and they can share locally what are the challenges they face in terms of utility and energy regulation and management. And so we're trying to create a program that is universal in appeal and not only brings numerous companies on board, as I mentioned one earlier, but also brings other academics into the program so they can share their experiences, and we can partner globally with some of the more international service providers. These are the hopes that we have for this program moving forward.
Yeah, and we talked about it on the last show, and I'll just emphasize it here. One of the reasons this program is so important and why RWA and other folks like Eversource are involved in it is, I called it the gray tsunami. It's actually the silver tsunami. So 40% of utility workforce can retire tomorrow with their full pensions. And, so this program is just another way that the RWA and other utilities are really trying to focus on the future to fill, no pun intended, the pipeline of those folks that are ready to retire, because, again, 40% could walk away. And if that happened, it'd be a little harder for us to get you water and for Eversource to get you electricity and gas. And
that's true.
So, and this program is great because, it's not just the folks that are in the field digging the holes, laying the pipe and the wire. It's the management folks too. I always say, you're never going to make millions of dollars working for a utility, but you can have an awfully comfortable living and an awfully comfortable life working for a utility. So it is a great program. I want to go and talk about some other programs you had mentioned briefly at the business school and initiatives that the business school has, but you said something in the intro that I wanted to hit upon real quick, where you talked about servant leadership. Is that the conscious capitalism? Is that, I've heard the term conscious capitalism is kind of the same.
I think now they refer to it as conscious business, but, the idea is being aware of people and planet and affecting practices that demonstrate how you care about society, how you care about community, how you care about the world and the environment, and engaging in practices that demonstrate that care. Servant leadership is a tangent of that type of approach, in that, you want to do well by others because, my belief, and I bring this to the school as the dean, is that things come back to you. I think if you care more about yourself than others, people are not going to push you up the ladder to success. They're going to pull you back down. And so I think if you really want to generate true leadership, true authority, true power in a sense. Power doesn't come from what you necessarily bring to the table with your two hands. I think making a difference means building a team. And collaboration is really important. And we try to practice the same thing in the school. That we help our students, for example, understand that they can be a part of the leadership of the school. We offer them a student ambassador association where they can be stewards to the school, and they can be, we call them mini deans. We have a student advisory board where students get involved in doing surveys and assessing the ecosystem of learning and recommending to me, like a board would recommend, the types of changes that would be in their best interest. You know, we'd love to hear about that, because I think shared governance is really an important part of my leadership style, and hearing from others. And, you know, when we did the strategic planning for our school, I came in with a vision, but in terms of building the strategy and the plan, we really went to the grassroots. We asked alumni, employers, corporate partners, community members, students, faculty, staff, what were they inclined to do? What was their passion? What really excited them? Because you really need to build an organization around the inclination and the capacity of the people who are participants in helping move the institution forward. And this has worked for me time and time again. And I think it's good and healthy for an organization to hear from its stakeholders and understand what their needs are, and use empathy and design thinking, because we employ design thinking, as a matter of fact, in an academy. We call it the Life Design Academy, where we help students engage in self-actualization, learning who they are. What is their personalized mission statement? What do they aspire to do? How do they fit in? Students don't know this. And it's so important that we help students understand we're there to help with this journey and to guide them across their journey and uncover opportunities for them. So this is kind of the culture that we built the school around. And then again, it ties together with women in leadership, which I think I touched upon earlier, that we have an academy to try to help
let's
women
talk about
understand.
that. Yeah, let's talk about the Women's Leadership Academy, because that was on my list. Can you just kind of explain what that is, how it started, and I guess what the mission of that academy is?
It started before I arrived at Southern through the philanthropy of a wonderful woman, Lindy Gold. And she was really a proponent of training the workforce, especially the young women who aspire to be leaders, about the challenges they face, how to overcome those challenges, how to be professional, and how to develop themselves in ways that they saw the world as an opportunity, and they could embrace the fact that the reality of the world is what it is. But how do we overcome those challenges that we face in terms of women assuming leadership roles in the workforce and the community? And the program provides these young women aspirants or students mentoring opportunities from professional women who are executives. We engage them in community service to build up their confidence and their ability to network and socialize effectively and overcome those challenges they face. And again, it's part of our care for community. We can't be everybody or everything to everybody, but we can certainly try to develop expertise in some of the underrepresented groups, some of the struggling workforce members, some of the communities at large, even small business development and entrepreneurship, the idea of trying to provide training to aspiring small business developers who might not have access to education. We want to take care of them. So I hope I'm getting across the point that we don't just see ourselves as a source of intellectual capital. We see ourselves as a source of care and trying to help people be successful wherever they come from by practicing diversity and inclusion of everyone.
I love that. And the Women's Leadership Academy, is that something that a woman applies for, like they apply to the School of Business? Or how if there are women out there listening who maybe this is their first time hearing about it and they would want to get involved in it, how would they do that?
Well, it's free of charge.
Okay.
We don't charge. It's supported by, as I mentioned, Lindy Gold, as a philanthropist, has really been quite generous in her time, talent, and treasure in supporting this effort. And we welcome everyone from inside to outside the university to just reach out to us. So if you want to let your listeners know, they can contact my office as the Dean of the Business School. They can contact Lisa Marotta, who directs the Women's Academy. And we'd be more than happy to engage them and immerse them in what we're doing with the hope that we can make a difference in their lives as well. So everyone's welcome.
And there is a whole section on the School of Business's website on this academy as well. So you can.
Well, I have to take a disclaimer there. We're redesigning the web pages right now.
The website. Okay.
So let's give myself I'll give myself an incomplete on that one.
Okay. In progress.
Yes.
Yes. You mentioned the entrepreneurship initiative too. Can you talk a little bit about that? I think most people haven't really thought about entrepreneurship until Shark Tank came on. And then, it's now everybody kind of thinks about it in starting a business and venture capital and all of that. At least that's how I think of it. And I'm just projecting onto the world. But can you talk a little bit about it and whether I'm completely off base when I bring up Shark Tank?
No, actually, I'm glad you brought that up because the truth is we were in touch with Shark Tank. at my last school. And we got to know the people on Shark Tank, and we invited them, and they accepted a casting call for Shark Tank at my prior school. So we actually got to meet them. They came on board. They let students do their pitches. What an exciting opportunity for students.
Did any of them make it onto the actual show? Or?
Well, I probably shouldn't mention yes or no, but well, I could leave it to the director of that program to maybe get in touch with you and tell you.
All right.
But the point is that here we're doing similar things. We recently launched a small business accelerator. I know the press came and it was out there. We'll hope it's going to be a great success. We care about small businesses. There's such a thriving small business community in the New Haven area, and so many aspiring small business developers and entrepreneurs who just have a great idea. And, you know, they really don't know how to launch. They don't know where to secure the capital. They don't know how to write a strategic plan. But, you know, as a guitarist and a writer of music and song, you have the creative energy, you have the ideation, and sometimes you need some training and some opportunities to figure out how to translate your great idea into a reality. So through our accelerator, we also have a community and corporate consulting academy. We also have a program called Get Virtual, which trains aspiring small business developments how to use technology. We really hope that from this triad of activities that we can touch the community in ways that bring them on board, get the kind of guidance, service, consulting, and advising they need to launch their business successfully. And let's not forget micro enterprise development, something that students are so aware of that most faculty, dare I say, don't engage in, because, technology has opened the door for different types of business development, unlike it had before. So there's great opportunities for small businesses to thrive and be successful. And we hope that your membership, your community of listeners might reach out to us, because we're here to help.
So the accelerator is really just giving these folks the tools that they need to succeed.
And guiding them.
And guiding them, because you're right. And that's actually one thing you kind of learn. I joke, like watching Shark Tank is kind of getting a mini business degree, because they really do ask you. I mean, the sharks ask the people that do the pitches really pointed questions, and you kind of hear that thing. Well, you don't have a business, you have an idea right now.
Right.
And you haven't taken your idea into the business phase yet. And so I think if you're paying attention to that show, you can actually learn a lot. But yeah, so the accelerator, really, you're giving them the guidance, you're giving them the tools they need to get from idea to maybe product, if it is a product, and then from product
to launch.
And then, you even hear them on Shark Tank. Well, it's not a business, it's a single product.
Mm-hmm.
And so taking it from single product to that next phase of, what's the business model going to be?
And we engage faculty and others in this effort, and successful entrepreneurs as well. So we can engage in many companies in the SME sector, regardless of what stage of development they're in, even businesses that have launched that want to take the next step or understand how AI fits into their business operation. We want to take them there.
That's awesome. The other thing I saw on the website, and I know the website's being reconstructed, but you have a business executive council. And I think you brought it up during our discussion, but can you talk about what that is and why it's important to you as a relatively new dean at the School of Business to have this council?
You're only as good as the services you can provide. And how do you really know what services to provide if you don't hear from your external constituencies and stakeholders? And who better to go to than perhaps local community members or experienced professionals or leaders in the corporate sector together? So to be honest with you, when I came here, they had a so-called business advisory board with about 20 people. And I came up with the idea that I brought from elsewhere, that we should have two hierarchies, you might say. An executive council that really has the executives from leading corporations on it, and then a board that is really a community board with people from all walks of life advising us. And so between these two now, we have expanded to have close to 100 members. And well, someone at the university said, Jess, how can you have a board with 100 members? How can you possibly meet with a group of 100? But we meet with the executives on the executive council regularly, and the business advisory board participates by engaging in many activities that we support. So we get the immersion of the corporate community together with our students, doing things together that would not be possible otherwise. But the executive council is really instrumental to us, because they're your philanthropists, those that really have the motivation to guide the school. They serve as a steering committee. They help to provide corrective action when necessary. They give us insights as to things that are trending in markets that we might otherwise be unaware of. Because, as I once said to others many times, for every 10 good ideas I might talk about, 9 of them are not mine. You just really learn by listening to others. If we think we know more than other people, we may as well retire. Because you really have to learn and immerse yourself like a sponge by learning from everybody whose life you touch.
I love that, and I agree completely. You can never stop learning. If you think you know everything, what's the point? So you've been geographically, you've been all over. Have you heard anything from this council here in New Haven that has kind of surprised you, or that you hadn't heard anywhere else, or are the challenges or the opportunities kind of in this region, I guess, different or unique, or is it pretty much the same as you've kind of heard elsewhere as you've talked to local leaders?
Well, I think they provide certain nuances that are local to the community. And we kind of call that concept contextualization, because the interesting point is, having run business schools across 6 different countries, it really is amazing how the local culture, whether it's the community culture or the corporate culture, is very much different in terms of behavior and appropriate practice. And it's really important to embrace that and find ways to build that into your curriculum if you want your students to really become global citizens. So having an executive council here that has 20 people who are professionals and some are multinationals is really important to me to hear their perspective. The good news is many of the ideas they share resonate with us as things that we know we're working on already, because I think we've charted a good course of action, because we've heard so many people talk to us about what's important. But the journey never ends, and many of the executive council members continue to write to me regularly through email or call me on the phone to help increase my awareness of some of the trending things in the local market concerning business development or diversity and inclusion that I might not be aware of. So, it's really invaluable to have them there.
That's awesome. So before we move out of the business school and into like some higher level talk, is there anything going on at the business school that we haven't touched upon that you want to kind of get out to the world, or you think we did a pretty good job of covering things?
I think we've pretty much covered the bases in terms of some of the things. Now I know some of our faculty and staff will say to me, Jess, you didn't mention this. Yeah. So I run that risk.
Yes.
But for the purpose of time, I think we've tried to get across the fact that we're a culture of caring, servant leaders. We try to build academic programs to attend to the environment, the services that are provided to people, attending to underrepresented group, working with minorities, helping the small business community thrive. We're really trying to just do the things that show we care about community, and every life we touch, we're very personalized like that.
And it's awesome to hear, because I think of universities, and for full disclosure, I worked for Rutgers University for 5 years. You tend to think of universities as just, get the kids in the door, have them pay their tuition, give them their degree, and send them out into the world. And it's so nice to hear your perspective that it's not just about getting them in the door, taking their tuition money, giving them a certificate, and sending them out into the world. Thank you. I tend to think if, the stuff you laid out with servant leadership, when all of those things are properly in place, and the thought processes of looking to the wider community and the community needs, the profit follows, right? It's, if you have all the good intentions and the right pieces and the right people in place and the right practices and the right mission, the profit will follow.
You're right. You'll be successful as long as you care about others and do good work by them.
Absolutely. So we've mentioned it a few times. I really want to have a discussion about AI from a couple of perspectives. First, I'll put my student hat on of someone who graduated college 20, almost 30 years ago. I think about AI and I think, boy, do I wish AI was around when I was in college, because, so many of those papers would have been so much easier to write if I had AI. So, my question from the student perspective is, do schools, not just Southern, but schools in general, do you guys have a way of catching students from writing a 10-page paper using ChatGPT or Copilot or one of them?
Well, that's a really sensitive issue and a very touchy question. Because I think when we focus on that, I personally believe we might be moving in the wrong direction.
Okay.
I remember when I was in school. Now I'm going to date myself because I was in college many years before you did. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be celebrating the 30th anniversary of my 37th birthday soon. So, I think when I was in college and I was in high school, World Book Encyclopedia was my source of information.
Britannica.
Britannica.
Yes.
Right? That was my artificial intelligence.
Yes.
This whole AI trend is nothing new in the world. It's just another platform, innovation through technology that allows us to access information in a very expedited and efficient way. And I firmly believe we as a university, faculty in the world need to embrace this type of technology. And rather than restricting the utilization of it in the classroom, I would love for our faculty to embrace students who understand how to do the query engineering and how to drive artificial intelligence to pick up on the information that they need to provide well-informed reports and well-informed analysis. And, when faculty speak to me about, well, can we restrict the use? I say, why do you want to do that? It's going to continue moving forward with or without us. And we need to embrace it because it's been prevalent. There's all different types of technological solutions that have come to place over the past 30 years that we could talk about, but they've affected jobs, they've affected development. But in the end, it helps the world to advance. And I think we need to be thinking about what can we do to rise above the challenges to embrace it more.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And I think about it from a corporate standpoint, right? To me, it's another tool. It's no different than Google or, even Microsoft Excel or Word or say it's just another tool you can use to create the best product you can. But I do think about when I was in college. So I took a class in world religion, and I had to do a 10-page paper on the Hindu wedding ceremony and rituals there within. And I just think how easy would it have been to go to ChatGPT and say, write a 10-page paper on the Hindu wedding ritual and all. Yeah. But I think you probably just rob yourself when you do that.
Oh, I think so too. I think we have to be on top of it and recognize that it's making the world a better place to live in. And while it provides some challenges, and perhaps some people might consider it as threats, I think we have to recognize that we've seen these challenges before and that it has led to the evolution of certain things that were not there before that have provided new opportunities that wouldn't exist if these technological advances did take place. So it's really a matter of transitioning out from one ecosystem that we're comfortable in to the adaptation, which is really important, of transitioning the ecosystem. Because if you lose your interest or ability to adapt, you'll go nowhere. And I think it's that adaptation that we have to embrace and look for how to make that adaptation happen in an effective way that helps all people, right?
Yeah, I think one of the concerns certain people have with AI is about jobs, right? So from your perspective at the School of Business, do you see AI replacing humans in any job, any kind of sector of the workforce? Or do you just, again, you said adapt, do you just see people adapting to use AI in their job?
There's no question that AI will remove jobs. In the same way computers remove jobs. We've been using mainframes for 60, 70 years, but when computing technologies became localized in your home and in the office, there were jobs that were removed. When EasyPass was created, what happened to all the toll workers that used to work the stations? When we went to digital video, where'd all the blockbusters go and all the Hollywood video? There's always an advent of technology that you're going to lose some members of the workforce. If you're in the private sector, shareholder wealth is very important. You always look for opportunities to become more efficient and effective. And even in the public sector, for the purpose of providing quality service at a reasonable price to consumers, you find ways to bring your costs down. And I think we need to be prepared for that. But rather than thinking of it as a challenge or a threat to the workforce, we think and we believe, or at least I do, that adaptation allows us to pursue alternative avenues. So, I'll give you an example, a very simple one. Cell phones. At first they were used as a medium just for giving a call. You had your flip-top phone, and now they've become emergent as something that you can't live without, right? But because of the emergence of cell phones and the creation of apps and social media platforms, which wouldn't have been in existence without cell phone technologies, now you have all these micro enterprises online where you can open up shops on TikTok and Instagram. Students can sell their professional services online. These were never around before. So think of the great market of opportunity for young Americans who are aspiring to be business professionals, marketing their wares, their services, building shops on Instagram and all these social media applications. which weren't around when the cell phone started. So, if we feel threatened by AI, we have to realize that just like computing technologies opened the door for data scientists that really needed to learn how to do programming and computer programming itself, these were evolving fields that computing technologies led towards in terms of the adaptation. And I think AI will lead to a similar adaptation where, for example, the field of query engineering and teaching people how to use engineering practices to get the results they want from AI, it's an emergent field. And I think it opens an opportunity for people to move into that underrepresented space now. And, if you're in an area that might be threatened by AI, retraining certainly is something that you can provide in the corporate sector in terms of helping people develop different skill sets and move into a different type of occupational work. But inevitably, I think there's more opportunity than there is cost of what AI represents.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think that's such a refreshing way to look at it too, where, it may phase out certain jobs, but then it's going to create this whole new economy and this whole new profession that didn't exist 10 years ago. And just like app development didn't exist 20 years ago. Right. And I still think you're going to need humans, because as good as AI can be, at the times I've used it, it's not perfect. You ask it to create something or write something, you still have to read through it with a fine tooth comb, and you realize that it didn't hit the mark exactly like you wanted it to. So you have to change a little bit here, add this. So I still think you're going to have the humans there to kind of double check the work, just like we still have accountants that are checking Excel and Quicken Books and all that. We still have real humans that are making sure that the computers did the math the right way.
And not just that, there's the human element in that. I think people can trust humans in a different way than they trust technology.
Yeah.
I'll give you a perfect example. In one of our classes at Southern, the faculty member told the students, here's a generative AI syllabus for this class. It was an introduction to marketing. And here's my syllabus. And he asked the students, which one would you prefer to use? And they picked the AI generative one. And the reason they did that is because they explained to the teacher, well, this is a basic marketing class. We think AI has the ability to learn and tell us what are the core concepts we need to know from a universal perspective and capture it together. But when you ask students that question about, for example, an advanced class, they tend to want the faculty member to create the syllabus because they believe that the faculty member is in closer touch with many of the advanced topics that might require some experience, you might say, working in the field. Same with utility management.
I was just going to say, it's the same thing we talked about with immersive experience.
And they have more faith in the human being than they do in a technology directing them on what might be needed at RWA. The people at RWA know best what RWA needs and what students need to learn. So I think there's that trust element. And also in the leadership capacity of organizations, there's careful negotiations that have to take place. There's communication back and forth vocally. AI doesn't have the ability necessarily to really read your heart and read your mind. And I think that one-to-one ability to talk to people, negotiate with them, work to influence them, help to understand them, that empathy. I don't think people have a lot of faith in AI to be empathetic, you might say, because you really have to teach AI what it needs to learn about an individual. And I don't think we're there yet, but you never know. Because, I'm a fan of science fiction movies, so you never know where this is going.
Yeah, depending on who you listen to. We're only a few short years away from being,
extinct.
Yeah, extinct or slaves to the AI. Yeah. So you mentioned, query management and all that. Do you see a future where schools like Southern are actually having classes on utilizing AI?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We're embedding AI now in many of our curricula and courses. The Board of Regents in Connecticut State now has mandated that you must demonstrate how AI is embedded in new curriculum that you bring forward. And I think not only embracing AI, but learning how to teach above AI and do the types of things that AI cannot do is a real charge to our faculty to learn how to manage and overcome that challenge. And it won't be necessarily easy, but I think it's a mandate that we have to engage in that as well. And teaching students how to do query engineering, how to really get the AI to the point you want to get them to. Well, there's an opportunity to train and have teachers teaching things that would not have been possible without AI.
Yeah.
So again, it's another avenue of opportunity to bring a younger faculty on board who are probably more familiar with technology from their youth to actually engage in the type of education and practices that they're even more comfortable with than our extant faculty who are residing at universities now.
Yeah, and I still think, getting back to the whole, I mentioned like students cheating. It still takes a core competency in that subject to know if what AI is giving you actually is what you want and what you need. Because your professor's going to know, because there may be just a couple of words within that paper that kind of triggers the thought that they didn't write this.
Or you made a great point earlier about the fact that, even if it's an AI generated report, there are earmarks that you can sense that tell you it was an AI generated report, and you might be missing the mark of what the overall intention of the paper was, because AI is only as good as the queries that it has to address. And so sometimes you have to inject that human element to mold the answer or contextualize it to what the real questions are. And that really takes human expertise. And certainly I believe our faculty are well equipped to do that.
Yeah. And having said that, I will just say, I think the AI programs that are out there are pretty incredible. Amazing. Like they are absolutely amazing. And I just, the two that I tend to play around with are ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot. And I queried the same query in both of them because I wanted to see the difference. And it was about 90% the same, like almost word for word.
Well, a universal database is what it is. Right?
Yeah. What the two programs came out with, and before we move on, I just want to say, if you're ever bored and want to have fun, ask one of these programs to create paintings for you. I did one the other day just because my daughter thought it'd be funny. I asked ChatGPT to create a Salvador Dali style painting of me riding a bike through a golf course. And I uploaded my headshot into it, and it came out with 4 very funky paintings.
It's amazing.
That you could almost print and hang on a wall as originals. It was very cool. So if you have really weird ideas and you wanted to come up with cool paintings, you can do that too.
Same with music.
Music too, yeah.
You could see things being created now that
write me a song about,
I had ChatGPT write me a Billy Joel song, I read it and I said to myself, those certainly look like lyrics that Billy Joel would write, or some of the marvelous work that's been done recreating existing artists' voice.
Yes.
And their tendencies and style of music.
Randy Travis, I just saw because he had a stroke 10, 15 years ago now. He's got an album out that's mostly AI.
Right.
It's crazy. Yeah. And I actually had ChatGPT write me a poem in the style of Dr. Seuss about drinking water. It was fantastic.
That's a great question.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fantastic. So you can have fun with these programs too. It doesn't all have to be academic and business. You had mentioned you've worked in academia in 6 countries, and I would hate myself if I didn't ask you what were the 6 countries.
Oh, Canada, Jordan, Bahrain, Abu Dhabi, China, UK, and back here at home in America.
Do you speak any of those languages besides UK and Canadian?
Absolutely not.
No. Okay. So I want to ask you one more academic type question before we get into our 5 unrelated questions. You've been in academia a long time, and I always love to ask folks who've been around a while in the same field, the 1 or 2 biggest differences from when you started in academia to where you are now. And I guess with you, like students, what's the biggest difference between students when you first got involved versus the students you're seeing today?
I think students today are more street smart. I think they've grown up with so many technologies around them. They've had an opportunity to visualize, if not be immersed, with so many of their peers that come from different locations, different backgrounds, different cultures. They seem to be so much more aware of what the meaning of diversity, equity, and inclusion really implies. Well, I think many of the students in my era, for example, when I was starting in higher ed as a professor, were a little bit more naive about that. And I think that that's one of the major differences, that they're ready to launch in certain ways. But at the same time, I think because they're ready to launch and they're so immersed in that technology, they've lost a little bit of sight as to who they are and where they want to go. They haven't really asked themselves those in-depth questions where, in the 80s or the 90s, I think students said, this is what I want to be when I get out of here. I think right now students, because of so many opportunities, need a little bit of guidance. And that's why we come in there with some of the life design principles, trying to help students fill in those gaps where they might have been prepared in that way 30 or 40 years ago. But now they're not, but they're more prepared in having a better understanding of the world that they're going to enter. So I think that's one of the changes. I'd say the one went up, one went down type of readiness that students have.
That's so interesting. So I had a couple of human resources folks in on our last show to talk about careers in water, and I asked them what they've seen difference with interviews, over the past 20 years, and one of them remarked that most of the people the young folks they interview now are more interested in what's next versus the job they're actually interviewing for at the time. It's more, okay, if I get this job, how quickly can I move up and what's the next job? And I remember when my first job, I just wanted that job. I didn't care. I didn't think about next. I still don't think about next. I'm just happy to have the job that I have. What about from, I guess, the way things are taught? I'll relate it to music. So we know back in 1991, 92, grunge just changed the music scene forever. In your career, has there been one thing that has just kind of changed universities, like the way grunge changed music forever?
I would say so. I think universities are now being held accountable in ways they didn't used to.
How so?
In the sense that tuition is quite high. Investing in college is a major investment for many. Some people have trouble digging out of it for years. And I think that families, community, the corporate sector, they're holding schools accountable now for making a difference. Because you can get knowledge capital in so many places today. Google, Amazon. I mean, you can gain knowledge by enrolling in micro-credentials. There are so many alternative delivery systems for knowledge capital out there at lower prices than tuition, that universities now are being held to a standard that they're not used to. And so where we are now, and my approach to that is, it's not only enough to be doing a lot of stuff. It's not enough to be doing a lot of good stuff. What you need to measure up to is, how is the good stuff you're delivering at a university affecting, influencing, or having an impact on your stakeholders, your community, your corporate sector? You have to be making a difference. You have to have measurements in place to understand, how are you affecting culture? How are you affecting lives? Why is a corporation going to pay for an MBA if they don't understand the value proposition behind it? It's not just packing knowledge into a suitcase and saying, now I'm a graduate, hire me. The question is, what can you do with the knowledge?
Yeah.
So through experiential education and trying to come up with measures of impact. If someone were to Google me online, they'd find an op-ed piece I did once saying that universities must be held accountable. We have to demonstrate that we have value to give back if we're going to command this tuition for students coming in, especially in the light of alternative delivery systems, which is something we didn't compete with many years ago, because you asked me, where's the difference?
Yeah.
30 years ago, the university was the university. You didn't have a competitor out there.
You have to go to a 4-year college. Yeah. That's what everybody, yeah.
Now you don't have to.
Now, yeah.
Just go get micro-credentials that your employer needs, and you can probably get a good job.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, thank you for that thoughtful answer. We're going to quickly turn to our 5 unrelated questions with the few minutes we have left. Learn a little more about you. Do you have any pets?
I used to have birds.
Birds? What kind of birds? Like
parakeets.
Parakeets.
I didn't want a bird that was too big for me. I didn't want to take a chance on the bird eating me up.
Yeah.
I stuck with parakeets. I used to like to train them how to talk,
Ah, nice.
So that's what I had. That's all.
Favorite band or musician?
Oh, a tough question. Depends on the genre, but I will just go with a pretty tried and true answer. Led Zeppelin.
Led Zeppelin. My last person said Led Zeppelin too, and we got into a bit of an argument about that. We don't have time for the argument today, though. What is your favorite hobby outside of work?
Collecting board games.
Board games?
Yeah,
really?
2000.
Really?
Yeah, many European strategy games and things of that nature. People always follow up by saying, have you played them all?
Yeah.
It might be 50.
50 of them, yeah.
But I always tell people I'll get into Guinness's Book of World Records sometime, because if my house burns down, it'll set a record for how fast it goes down, because I'm the greatest cardboard.
What's your favorite one?
Probably Civilization by Francis Tresham. It was invented in the 80s. It takes about 12 hours to play, but it's a really immersive civilization development game.
That is very interesting. Cookies, brownies, or ice cream?
Well, give me ice cream anytime. I don't care what flavor.
Yeah, I was just going to say, which flavor you don't care.
Any flavor. I got too many pints in my belly right now.
All right, so now we will ask the dean, who was your favorite teacher in school and why?
Well, I've got to name 2. there were one of my professors at Fairleigh Dickinson University. His name was Dr. Richard Bronson. Was very influential in my life. He was a mentor to me. And I'll give you one very quick story if I have a minute to tell it.
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Well, he wanted me to go. I was getting a master's degree. He wanted me to get a PhD at the Wharton School. He asked me about it. I said, I don't even know what a Wharton School is. But, he kept mentoring, and then he made a deal with me. It was very tricky, very tricky. But he said to me, I know you're playing in a band. I know you're doing a concert at the university in about 3 weeks. How about I'll make you a deal? He said, I'll bring my whole family to come watch you play at your concert if you just promise me you'll apply at the Wharton School of Business. So I thought to myself, wow, 4 more people in the audience. That might be important. So I took him up on his deal. He came with his whole family, and then I had to apply, and everything was great from there. And then at the Wharton School itself, Dr. Paul Kleindorfer, God rest his soul, he passed away a couple of years ago. He's my advisor. So instrumental to me as a friend. Used to have me over his house in his garden to work on my dissertation. Very influential. The key word there is mentorship. And it's played a role in my whole life, and I think we need to take the responsibility of being mentors to others.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It's one of my favorite parts of this show is asking about the teachers, because teachers do not get enough credit for affecting people's lives. So thank you for sharing that. And with our last minute or two, I just want to say, if you take one thing away from this show, it's that the Southern School of Business specifically is not just about taking tuition money and giving you a certificate. They really are about shaping you and making you think outside the box and making you think bigger picture about your purpose and how you want to be a leader in the community. And you can visit their website, the old one or the new one when it comes out if you want to learn more. And with that, you have been listening to Liquid Lunch with the Regional Water Authority. I'm your host, Kevin Watsey. I just want to again thank Dean Jess Baronico, the School of Business at Southern Connecticut State University. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and we look forward to our next show where we'll be talking all about bats.
Rock on.
Rock on. Have a good one, folks.